In this video, we are going to look at solving percentage problems, and we're going to look at this using two different methods. The first method is using the base portion rate triangle or formulas, but we're also going to look at this using proportion. So if you've watched our previous video on solving problems using proportions and you like that method, then you can use that same strategy in order to solve percentage problems as well. So I'll show you two different ways to solve these. But what are percentage problems? So anywhere where you have a percent in the question could be a percentage problem. So something like, if my restaurant bill is $25 and I want to tip 15%, what should my tip be? Or if I only paid 75% of the original price of these pants and now they're $10, how much were they originally? Or I got 25 out of 30 on my test. What percentage did I get on my test? They're all examples of base portion rate or percentage problems. Now, the trickiest part of the base portion rate problems is identifying what's your base, what's your portion, and what is your rate. So your base is the number which is referred to as the whole. It is equal to 100%. It would be equal to 100% of whatever the problem is. So for example, the amount of a bill for dinner, the original cost of the item. Usually we have the word of in the question right before the number if it's a base. Not always, but it can be a good indicator. A portion is an amount of the base. So the tip for dinner, how much you've paid after a discount, those are all a portion of the base. Now, most of the time, the portion is a smaller number than the base, but not all the time. If you have a rate or a percentage that is over 100%, your portion is going to be more than the base. So there is cases where the portion is bigger. So don't always assume that the smaller number is the portion and the bigger number is the base. Most of the time that's true, but not all of the time. And then we have the rate, which is the percentage. That one's nice and easy to pick out. So whatever the percentage is, we call that the rate. So for example, how much you want to tip, so 15% would be your rate. So let's first practice identifying the base, the portion, and the rate in the question. So for example, if I said 25% of 180 is what number, the first thing that I like to do is find my rate because it's the quickest and easiest one to find. So my rate in this case is going to be 25%. Now when doing these percentage problems, we're going to use a decimal, the percentage problem as a decimal. We're going to use the rate as a decimal. So I'm going to record this as 0.25. Remember from a previous video on converting between fractions, decimals, and percentages, we're going to take 25 and divide by 100 because percent is out of 100. So 0.25. Now I need to think of my next number that I have in the question, which is of 180. Is that my base or is that my portion? Well, I do see my keyword of there, but it's also, if you're looking at the question, it's saying that 180 is the 100%, and I want to figure out what 25% is equal to. So 180 is the total. And so if that's the case, then 180 is my base, and that means I'm looking for my portion. Okay, so I want you to pause the video and I want you to try questions 2 and 3 there, just pointing out what's the base, what's the portion, what's the rate. You don't actually have to solve the question at this point, and then start up the video again when you're ready. Okay, so again, the first thing that I like to do is to find my rate. So I have 35%, and to get in the good habit of writing it as a decimal, I'm going to do it right away, and I get 0.35. Now this question is saying 35% of what number is 100? So that is 100 is telling me that 100 is equal to 35%, and I'm asking what is 100%? And so that's telling me that 100 is my portion, and I'm looking for the base, what the original number was. And finally, in question number 3 here, I'm looking for my rate and I don't see it. It actually says what percent. So that means I'm looking for my rate here. And the question says 60 is what percent? So that's telling me that the 200 is my total, my original amount, and it's asking for the percentage that is equal to 60, so 60 being my portion. So now we've practiced how to pick them out as base, portion, or rate. Let's look at how to actually use this. So this is our base, portion, rate triangle. In order to do this, again, we start off with identifying what is the base, what is the portion, what is the rate, what am I looking for? You're going to cover the part of the triangle that is what you're looking for, and what is left will tell you the formula. So for example, if I am looking for base, and I cover up the base portion of the triangle, that tells me that I have portion divided by rate left. So we can think of that as portion divided by rate like this, or you can think of it as portion divided by rate, whichever way you like to think of it. If I am looking for my portion, then that leaves base times rate. And finally, if I'm looking at for my rate, that tells me it's portion divided by base, or we can think of it as portion divided by base like this. So this triangle helps us remember the formulas of what we need to do with the numbers once we've identified them. So let's practice again with the examples we had above. So question number 1, we said that the 25% was our rate, and we wrote that as 0.25. We then said that 180 was our base, and we're looking for our portion. So according to our triangle, portion is base times rate. So that means I'm going to do 180 times 0.25, which is 45. Okay, so I want you to try out question 2 and 3. I'll put up the answers we had looked at last time of how we identified them. So if you can try solving these, so pause the video, try solving them, and then start it up again when you're ready. Okay, so in this one we said 35% was our rate. We said 100 was our portion, and we're looking for base. So base is equal to portion divided by rate. We can think of it like this. So that is going to be 100 divided by 0.35. We get 285.7 if we round to 1 decimal place. And for question number 3, we said we were looking for our rate. 60 was our portion, and 200 was our base. So if I'm looking for my rate, rate is portion divided by base. So we get 60 divided by 200, which is 0.3 or 30%. So we like to put our answer back into that percentage. Okay. So let's look at some word problems. So the first one, what is 40% of 200? So again, the first thing I'm going to do is try and pull out my base, my portion, and my rate. So what is 40% of 200? Well, 40% is my rate. 200 is my base, and I'm looking for my portion. So portion is base times rate, if we remember our formula. Right, so if I cover up the portion, I have base times rate. So that means it's 200 times 0.4, which is 80. Let's try question number 2. So again, I'm going to try and pick out my base, my portion, and my rate. So in this case, I'm not seeing a percentage. 230 grams is what percent? So I'm looking for my rate, and it's saying that 230 grams is what percentage of 4,000 grams. So 4,000 grams is my original number, or my total, my 100%. So that means it's going to be my base, and 230 grams is my portion. And if I'm doing rate, I'm doing portion divided by my base. So 230 divided by 4,000 is 0.0575, or 5.75%. Okay, so I also said I was going to mention how to solve this using proportions, because we've been doing some work with proportions in this unit. And so I'm going to show you how you can do the same thing using the proportion setup. So what I'm going to do is set up my units on one side and my percent on the other. So in this case, I'm saying, what is 40%? So 40% is 40 out of 100. And I'm saying, what is 40% of 200? So 200 represents my 100%. So I'm going to put the 200 next to my 100, and I'm putting an X next to 40. So I'm saying 100% is 200. What is 40%? And now that I have my proportions set up, I can cross multiply to solve. So I get 100x equals 8,000, and then I'm going to divide by 100 in order to get my x by itself, and I get 80. So I get to the same answer. So it doesn't matter which method you use, it's whatever method makes most sense to you. So let's try the next one. So the question says 230 grams is what percent of 4,000 grams? So is what percent means I'm looking for what out of 100 is the same as 230 grams out of 4,000 grams. Okay, so 4,000 grams represents 100. What represents 230 grams? And now that I have it set up, I'm going to cross multiply. And then I'm going to divide by 4,000 in order to get the x by itself. And I get 5.75. So with the proportion one, it will give you the percentage right away because we're writing it out of 100 already. So you don't need to put it into a decimal, and you don't need to multiply at the end. It's already going to do that for you. Okay, so as we go through the next, feel free to use the base portion rate method or the proportion method, or try them both in order to figure out which method works best for you. But I'd like you to try questions 3, 4, and 5 on your own. Pause the video, try them out, and then start up the video again when you are ready. Okay, so question number 3. If we're looking at our base portion rate method, we're saying 54% is our rate. 23.2 pounds is 54%, so that is our portion. And I'm looking for my base. So base is portion divided by rate. I'm going to do 23.2 divided by 0.54. And I get 42.96 if I'm rounding to 2 decimal places, and the unit of pounds. So make sure you're always adding your unit in at the end. And if I'm doing this the proportion way, we'll do it in green over here so we can differentiate between question 2 and 3. So in this case, what we're going to do is it's 54 out of 100. And it's saying that 23.2 is 54. So what is 100? Then I'm going to cross multiply. And then divide by 54 to get the x by itself. And I get 42.96 pounds. Okay, question number 4. How many milliliters would be 18% of 240? So 18% is our rate. It's saying that how many milliliters would be 18%. So we're looking for our portion. 240 milliliters is our base. So portion is base times rate. So I'm going to multiply my base and rate together. And I get 43.2 milliliters. And if we're looking at this in terms of proportions, we're going to say that 18 out of 100 is equal to what out of 240 milliliters? I cross multiply. And then divide. To get my answer. In question number 5, what percentage of 185 pounds is 72 pounds? So I'm looking for my rate, which is portion divided by base. So I'm going to do 72 divided by 185 is 0.3891 and so on, or we can say 38.92% if we round to 2 decimal places in our percent. Proportions wise, this would look like what out of 100 is the same as 72 out of 185. So then I'm going to cross multiply and divide, and you would get 38.92%. Okay, let's try some more complicated word problems here. So I have 2 word problems put up on the screen there, question 7 and 8. I'm going to pause the video, try them out, and then start up the video again when you're ready. Okay, a patient was put on 1,500 milliliters daily fluid restriction. After lunch, he had consumed 30% of his daily fluids. How much has he consumed? So again, if we're looking at base, portion, and rate, 30% is my rate. They get 1,500 milliliters a day, so that is going to be my base. And they're asking how much of that have they consumed. So what is my portion? So portion is base times rate. So we're going to do 1,500 times 0.3 to So you get 450 milliliters. Okay, it's super important you're adding your units in there, so don't forget those. If you like the proportions method, then you would say 30 out of 100 is how much out of 1,500 milliliters? And then I'm going to divide by 100 to get x by itself, and I get 450 milliliters. Okay, and question number 8. A patient is given a cup of broth which holds 260 milliliters. If she drank 182 milliliters, what percent of the broth did she consume? Okay, so what percent means I'm looking for a rate. It originally had 260 milliliters, and she drank 182 milliliters. So I want to know what percent of that is the rate. And rate is portion divided by base. So I'm going to do 182 divided by 260, which is 0.7 or 70%. Now if you like proportions, then you would say what out of 100 is 182 out of 260. You're going to cross multiply and then divide, and you would get 70%. We can also look at percentage change. So when a quality increases or decreases by a percent, then we call this percentage change. And we can use both base portion rate and proportions in order to figure out this percentage change. So for example, the price of a shipment of syringes that originally sells at $245 is increased by 20%. Calculate the dollar amount of the increase and the price after the increase. So there's kind of a multi-step problem here. But the keyword there, increased by 20%, that's going to give us an indicator that this is a percentage change. The process for solving is still base portion rate, but what makes these questions a little bit trickier is that our rate isn't always something that's given to us right away. It's not always as obvious as it was in some of the previous questions. So in this case, base portion rate, it's saying it originally sells at $245. So we know that is our base. It wants to know the dollar amount of the increase and the price after the increase. So there's kind of two ways that we could solve this. We could first figure out the dollar amount of the increase. So I could say, well, I know it's increasing by 20%. So I'm going to figure out what is 20% of 245. So I'm looking for my portion, my 20% portion of the base. So portion equals base times rate. So I'm going to do 245 times 0.2. So remember, we always write our rate in a decimal. And that is $49. Now be careful, that's not how much the price is, that's how much that it's being increased by. So the dollar amount of the increase is $49. The price after increase is going to be 245 plus 49, which is $294. The other way we can solve this is by being creative with our rates. So the original is still $245. But if I want to find out the price after the increase, if I'm going straight to the price after the increase, then I know the portion, the amount they're going to pay, isn't 20%, it's not 100%, but it's 120%. So I want to know, well, if it's increased by 20%, then how much is 120%? Because they're going to be paying 100% of the price, plus an additional 20%. So altogether, they're paying 120%. So you can see by being creative with our rate there, that means I can do this in one step because proportion is base times rate. I'm going to do 245 times 1.2 because that is 120 as a decimal. And I get rate to $294. Both are completely correct ways of solving this problem, so whichever way makes the most sense to you. And you can also solve both of these using proportions. So in this case, I could say, well, I want to know what 120% of 100 is. So what is that out of 245? So 245 represents 100%. The price increase that I'm looking for is 120%. And that will also get me to the answer right away. We can also do this with decreases. So a digital blood pressure monitor normally sells for $350 and it's discounted by 20%. What is the amount of the discount and the price after the discount? So base portion rate. The original price is $350. That is our base. We're looking for a portion. And depending on whether you want to go straight to what the price is after the discount or you want to figure out what the dollar amount of the discount is. So if I want to find the dollar amount of the discount first, then I'm going to say, well, what is that 20% that's being discounted? Portion is base times rate, or in this case, 350 times 0.2. So that means they're being discounted $70. So the price after the discount is going to be 350 minus 70. And it's going to be $280. If I wanted to get right to the price after the discount without having to find the amount of the dollar and subtracting, again, I can get creative with my rates. So I have $350 is the original price, and I want to know the price after the discount. Well, what percentage is that proportion going to represent? How much are they paying? In this one, they were paying 120% because it was increased by 20%. But in this one, it's being discounted by 20%, which means the portion is 80% of the original price. So now if I do portion equals base times rate, I'm going to do 350 times 0.8, and I get to 280 right away. And again, we can do this with proportions. I can say 80 of 100 is equal to what out of 350? And I can solve it through to get the same answer. Okay, we can also figure out the rate of this. So in the previous questions, we were looking at finding a portion. What if we want to know what was that percent of change? So here, 2 years ago, the price of a dosage of medicine was $5.40, and today the same medicine sells for $7.60. What is the percentage change? So in this one, we have to be careful with picking out the base and the portion in order to figure out what that rate was. So in this one, what is the base? Is it 540 or is it 760? we have to think of what the base means. Remember, the base is the original price, the original 100%. And in this case, that is $5.40. So my base here is $5.40. That's my original price of the medication. I want to know what the percentage change is. But what is my portion? Is $7.60 my portion? Now it depends on how you want to solve this out. You could use $7.60 as your portion. Or you can say, well, I'm looking for how much the medicine went up. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for how much percent did it increase by. So my portion is going to be how much the medicine increased by. Which is $2.20 is how much that percentage increased by. So here, if I want to find my rate, I'm going to do portion divided by base. So I'm doing $2.20 divided by $5.40. And you get 0.407407 and repeated, or 40.74% increase. So that means it went up by 40.74%. Now, if I had used $7.60 as my portion, let's see what that looks like. I'm still going to do portion divided by base. I get 1.407407 and so on, or 140.74%. Now, does that mean it increased by 140.74%? No, it means that the new price is 140.74% of the old price, which means it had a 40.74% increase. So again, either way you do it, you will get to the same answer. You just have to really think about what is base, what is portion, and what does that rate represent. Now, if you had done this using proportions, then you would end up with kind of the same thing. You could do what percent out of 100 equals 220 over 540, and you could solve through to get right to your 40.74%, or you could have done what percent out of 100 is the new price out of the old price, and you would get to 140.74, and you would have to then subtract the 100% to see what the increase was. Okay, so here is 2 more questions for you to try with percentage increases and decreases. You can pause the video and then start it up again when you're ready. Okay, in question number 4, it says, after a discount of 24%, a nursing uniform was sold for $153. What was the price of the uniform before the discount? Okay, so base, portion, rate. So after a discount of 24%, a nursing uniform was sold for $153. So the new price is $153. We want to know what the original price was before the discount. What is our rate? Is our rate 24%? No, because our rate, the 24%, represents how much was subtracted in order to get to 153. So that means my rate is going to be 76%. In other words, 153, my portion, represents 76% of the original price. So we have to be very careful with our rates here. So if I'm looking at my base, I'm going to do portion divided by rate. I'm doing 153 divided by 0.76. And I get 201.32. So $201.32. If you're looking at this as a proportion, same thing, you would do 76 out of 100 represents 153 out of how much? And then I would solve through. To get my 201.32. Okay. And finally, a solution of 400 liters is comprised of half saline and half water. 6% of the saline was removed. What is the new volume of saline in the solution? So there's a couple ways you can solve this question. You can either figure out how much is 6% and subtract it, or you can go right to the final answer of how much the new volume is. But either way, we need to figure out what our base is. So we're looking at the new volume, so we're looking for proportion here. Is my base 400? No, because that is both saline and water. So that means my volume, my original volume of saline was 200 liters. My rate depends on whether I want to go right to the final answer or not. So if we want to first figure out what 6% is, then we can put our rate as 6% and put that into a decimal. So then if we're looking for portion, we do base times rate. I'm going to do 200 times 0.06, which is 12 liters. So is that my new volume? No, that's 6%. So that means that I need to subtract that because that's how much was removed. So the new amount is 188 liters. Or if I want to get right to my final answer, I could say the original amount is 200. How much is left? And left is 94% of the original amount. So I can do 200 times 0.94, which gets me right to 188 liters. And again, you can do both of these in proportions as well. Okay, so I want you to reflect over how you have done in this whole video. I want you to give yourself a thumbs down, a pointer, or a thumbs up. Thumbs up if you can solve these problems using percentages, including the percentage increase. You don't need help or more practice, you've got it. A finger pointed if you're thinking, I maybe need a bit more practice with this. And thumbs down if you're like, I'm having a lot of trouble solving these problems using percentages and I need help.